I have to take a photo. This is my new hobby, okay? I feel like I'm in the right spot to have a camera too. Being at race service here. Look at that, I don't even have the lens cap off. Said hobby, okay? Yes. Oh, you guys look good. Are you kidding me? That's an inside joke from last night. We had a really fun time doing a little photo shoot. Sorry, Rod, I don't know why I'm talking. You should talk, my bad.
You can introduce me. No, okay.
You start and then I'll go.
Okay. We're gonna do mirroring, right? So I'm supposed to sit the same as you.
Absolutely.
Right?
I'll be moving multiple times tonight to see if you can keep up with it.
I'm gonna lean forward for now. We'll see if you lean forward or not. So hello, welcome to Night School. And our objective with Night School is to inspire and see what we can learn. And we've been looking for the most exceptional people that we can find and talk to about their approach to their careers that's in the space that Race Service operates in. So we're in the creative space, but we also live and breathe motorsports, automotive. So tonight we're going to be deep diving into the world of racing drivers, the careers, the mindset of performance, and we'll see what we can learn from Josef. So, welcome. So, this is your life. So,
I'm a little nervous.
Karting at 13. So, we know that you started go-karting at 13, and this is unusual because typically you should be starting when you're 5 or 6, right? So I'd love to hear more about the starting point, maybe you at 12, and how things started at 13.
Well, first off, it's great to be here with everybody. Thank you for coming out. I'm a huge fan of Race Service. I love this culture that is kind of bred here. You know, we're going to talk a lot about that tonight, about the industry of motorsport and what works, what doesn't. You know, why do people find success? How do they find success? And I'm a big believer in what this group is doing. I mean, this is, you know, you're looking at it as just you're calling it night school. It's just an event you're going to. But the community that they're creating here, the connections that you meet, this is what everything in the world is built off of. It's about people. It's about the way that people come together, the way they get the most out of each other. And I think Race Service does a really great job of that, and they do it very authentically, right? That's such an important word nowadays. Like these are car people. We're all car people and enthusiasts here, while also, you know, getting into the business side of the job. And I love that it's in that order. You know, it's not the other way around. So it's always a pleasure to be here. But absolutely, Rod. I started karting at 13. I always loved racing. My exposure to it was on TV. I didn't really have many outlets outside of watching it on TV, and went to the track a couple times with my dad. He was a big fan of motorsports as well, and would always watch with him. And, you know, it didn't really matter what it was. It could be NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar. I watched everything, and finally convinced him to go try karting when I was 13. And, you know, I didn't want to do anything else after that. I played baseball, basketball. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so like typical suburban growing up, you know, just trying to go to school, figure out who you are as a person. I loved sports, but I quickly fell in love with, when I finally got an opportunity to drive karts for the first time, I knew this is what I want to do with my life. I don't know how, I don't know what it's going to manifest into, but I've got to be a part of motorsport. It's my favorite thing in the world, and certainly wanted to be a race car driver, but even if that part didn't work out, I think I'd have to be a part of it in some way or form. So yeah, we started here and you know, learned a lot of hard lessons early and just tried to figure out, you know, how can we navigate this industry. And I'll tell you, the most difficult thing, to sum it up, is, you know, it's like anything in life. It's really tough to figure out how you make a career in motorsport, and you've just always got to keep going. When one door closes, you look for that next one to open and try and find another solution.
But were you thinking about that as a 14 and 15-year-old? How to make it in the industry, et cetera? Were you thinking that far ahead? Like, are you that kind of person that you had that focus?
Not at the time, to be honest with you. What I've noticed about myself, so I'm 33 now, and I've only gotten, I think this is a good thing, this is probably how it should work, I've only gotten better as I've gotten older. And, you know, it's so quintessential. I look back and I say, I wish I knew what I knew now at 13. But I wish I had the drive and the ambition that I have now when I was 13. I just, every year I become more focused on my goals and trying to not squander any opportunity that's in front of me. And I don't think that I was trying to squander any opportunity when I was 13, but you just don't know what you don't know. And I wasn't focused on, okay, how am I going to become a professional driver? I just thought, I want to win races, and I really enjoy showing up to the track. It was really the most pure time in my life was when I was racing karts. I was doing it just because I loved the competition of racing and the tinkering of it and trying to understand how to beat the competition around you.
But at what point did it become more serious, from club racing to championships, getting more regional or even national? Just talk us through that progression in go-karting.
Yeah, once I got basically to the 2 years into karting and I was 15, and you start learning a little bit more about, okay, there's a jump off point here. If you seem like you have talent in a kart and you now want to transition that into a car, that's sort of the natural progression. And you go, okay, well, what does that really look like? And then it starts to become a little bit more serious in your mind. There's just a switch mentality-wise where the karting felt so natural and approachable, and then trying to transition that into a car just felt very daunting to me. I remember feeling very nervous when I was a kid, like, I know I can drive a go-kart really well, but I don't know that I can drive a race car very well, and I worry if that's going to work out.
Were you winning these go-kart races? Were you at the front?
Yeah. I mean, I never did a bunch of national level karting. It was it was too expensive, and it was very difficult travel-wise. If you wanted to race in WKA was very big, Stars of Karting was also a very big series, and it was just exponentially more expensive to do that than strong regional racing. So I started racing at a track called Newcastle Motorsports Park. It was in Indiana. It was kind of state-of-the-art at the time. It was like the nicest karting facility back in 2003, and had very strong regional talent. They'd pull from Ohio, they'd pull from Indiana, they'd pull from Michigan, basically any part of that Midwest region, and you'd get the best of the best from young karting. So I didn't have to go national racing, and we were very successful there. I had a couple championships each year that way I raced at that track, and it just seemed like we didn't need to keep pounding around in karts. It was how do we figure out the transition, and how do we figure out racing in cars, because ultimately that's what we need to be doing. Yeah, to get to the top. That's a good one.
Well, let's talk about that transition, because it seems like that you hit a wall there, quite literally, with that transition point. So talk us through what happened at Sebring 2006, and maybe just the transition into getting into some race cars from go-karting.
This was a very pivotal moment in my career. So I finally got out of karts, and the most affordable thing at the time was Skip Barber. Like, if anybody in this room knows Skip Barber, the Skip Barber Racing School, they had a national championship, and it was like the thing to go do. If you didn't have a bunch of money and you were like, okay, how do I transition into car racing from karts? Skip Barber was the best bang for your buck. They used to run with Champ Car. They had a national series. They also had some regional series. And, to put numbers behind it, if you wanted to run the national championship in Skip Barber, you could probably do it for 45, 50 grand, which is a lot of money, but was significantly less than other forms of Formula car racing. So it was like, all right, maybe that's an equation we can figure out. So one of my very first races that I went to go do in Skip Barber was a much smaller regional championship race at Sebring. And my very first race, I pancaked the wall in turn 17. So if anybody knows Sebring, turn 17 is that's a pretty tough corner. You enter like flat out on this right-handed kink, and then you got to kind of do this 180. And I just sailed it in there and went straight into the wall. First race. I was like, yeah, this was my fear. I'm like, I'm coming from karts. I win in karts, no problem, but I don't know that I can drive a race car super well. And I honestly wanted to quit after that. I remember that night. It was a Saturday race, and I was having dinner with my dad, and I'm like, I don't think I want to keep doing this. And it's really not the person I am today. It's fascinating when I think back to it, but I had a ton of reservation for getting back out there and doing it.
Did you have any other doubt, like CDs that would come up sometimes that came to the foreground after the crash? Like, was there noise in your mind?
At that moment?
Yeah.
I mean,
or slightly before, these doubts that you're talking about.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Before, definitely. I was always very nervous about that. This has been a big progression. I've learned so much in my racing career. One thing, we're probably going to get to this, but before that, I was always so nervous to wreck a race car. And, I'd only tested a couple times, and even before this first race, I'm like, I can't wreck the car. I can't wreck the car. And that was kind of my thought process. And what happens? I literally go and, smoke the wall immediately. So it kind of just manifested itself. And after that night, my dad didn't push me. He was just like, look, you got to do what you want to do, but, make sure you don't have any regrets when we're done here. And he put it in a really good way. He never forced me to do anything. He kind of let me make a decision. And I raced the next day, and I won the race. And it was a very pivotal moment for me, because I transitioned from having this extreme fear and anxiety for I can't wreck the car, and it changed my entire attitude for how I drive the race car. And the one thing you cannot have is doubt. When doubt starts to creep in about your ability, that's why you hear a lot of race car drivers are arrogant, because they kind of have to be really good. I'm dead serious. If they're not a little bit arrogant, it's really hard for them to drive at the limit. You don't want to be a total a-hole, but you have to step foot inside a car and believe that I am in complete control of what I'm doing right now. It's so hard to drive the thing at the absolute limit with the best of the best if you do not believe that. So there was a shift for me when I had that wreck and I got in the car the next day. From there on, it's not like I don't ever have doubts, but I was a different mindset inside the race car.
So if we that are listening to you can learn something, if you want to try and summarize a lesson that came from this moment, how would you describe that?
I think it's trying to find your inner belief system, and that looks different to everybody. I can't tell you what that looks like for each individual, but if I was going to encourage you to look for something, I think it's setting your values, and it's building that confidence within yourself. And that happens in a different way for everybody, but it's so important to try and find that inner confidence. With anything that you do, we should all feel confident about what we're pursuing in life, because that confidence really pulls the best out of yourself. It gives you the best chance, I think, to achieve whatever you can achieve. That's what I took from it, because if I didn't have that, I don't know how I could have kept going if I didn't build that confidence very early.
Yeah. So things progress. You go to the UK, and we know that this went quite well. So talk us through going to British Formula Ford and that progression, that stage.
Yeah, this was a really cool time in my life. So I drove Skip Barber, I drove the national championship, and then I got this incredible scholarship opportunity. It's called the Team USA Scholarship. It was kind of this organic thing that this British journalist, kind of ironic, it was a British journalist that created a USA scholarship program. And this journalist, Jeremy Shaw, which some people in this room might know, he wanted to provide an opportunity for young American aspiring drivers to go and compete on an international stage. And so I won this scholarship award, and it took me to England to race in the British Formula Ford Festival, which is a super famous race. This was the race that Ayrton Senna or Michael Schumacher were looking to compete in that have won, and that was always a springboard to Formula One. And I ended up going over there, won the race. I was the first American to win the British Formula Ford Festival. And
is it Brands Hatch?
It's at Brands Hatch, yeah. And it created a springboard for me to try and compete in Europe. And so I moved over there when I was 16. I probably just turned 17 when I actually touched down. And I lived there for 2 years, and I started with British Formula Ford, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. I got to travel all over the United Kingdom. I lived in Oxford in this apartment with another race car driver. And it's just what you think about in movies. I was just a young kid by myself, living with another race car driving, knowing a bunch of other race car drivers around us. And man, we had so much fun, and just traveling around the country by myself in a car. And I drove for this team where literally the team was out of a barn on a farm. It was just you go to the Tandy household, and they're tending to the crops, and you go into the barn and check out the cars. It was exactly what you would think out of a movie. It was so much fun, and I learned a lot. It reminded me of go-karting, but in racing form with cars.
And you were quite successful that season, right?
Super successful. We won the most races. I didn't win the championship. I ended up finishing second, but it was a great year, and it caught everybody's attention. I was definitely in the conversation of, I think I deserve to be here, and I think I can compete with the best. Is basically what it showed.
So was your mind starting to think of Formula One and this type of imagery?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, at the beginning, I said I like everything, and I really do. I dreamed of running the Indianapolis 500. I dreamed of, running any sort of race car, but Formula One was definitely first on the list. I think it's just, it's kind of the branding and the image of what Formula One is. It's branded as the pinnacle, and in so many ways it is when you look at the technology and the build of the cars, and that's, when I was a kid, that was what was captivating to me. I wanted, what's the fastest car? I want to drive that. So Formula One was very much first on my list. And I thought, let's try and do whatever we can to make it over there. And so that's, from British Formula Ford, you start looking at, to this slide, GP3, and, it's actually, I'm going to talk a lot, but I had a lot of crazy stories. So I was going to go to Formula 3 after British Formula Ford. So British F3 was like the thing to go do, and that was the springboard to GP2 at the time. And so it was like, you race British Formula 3, if you win that championship, probably go to GP2 and then get a ride in Formula 1. And I found an investor, like this really prominent, guy that had seemed to be, tons of money, and he's like, I want to back you, I think you're the guy, and signed a deal with him, and it was like, I signed a deal with a Formula 3 team, and he was going to pay the bill. And I made a seat, the whole thing, and I showed up to the very first preseason test of the F3 season in 2010, and I'm just like sitting there, in the garage, like waiting for the check to clear. It was like I went through this whole process with this team. It was called Fortec Racing. Like I had my engineer, I had my seat, check never cleared. Never cleared. This guy just like fell off the face of the planet. And I'm like, it's right before the season starts. This whole off season, we're like, oh, it's going to be good, it's going to be good. And then it falls through at the last minute. And we're kind of sitting there with our hands in our lap. I didn't have any money really to do anything else. And GP3 came up as like a last minute solution. This was the first year that GP3 was started, was 2010. And they had an issue because when GP3 started, they signed up 10 teams. Each team had to have 3 cars. And if you didn't put 3 cars on the track for a race weekend, they were penalized heavily by the FIA. They penalized them like 50 grand per car they were missing. So now they didn't have a full grid, and you had teams calling drivers to be like, hey, we got to put somebody in the seat. We'll give you a crazy deal. Just pay us a little bit of money and we'll put you in the car. And so I got this incredible deal from Carlin. We somehow scraped the money together, and I ended up running GP3, very last minute. Never been in a wing car in my life. And this was a pretty high downforce car from Formula Ford, and that's why I ended up doing that.
How did it go?
It didn't go well. Yeah, it's one of the down moments in my career. We could talk an hour about GP3, and I don't want to be here all night and bore everybody, but it was very political, Rod, like so political. And I don't want to make it about politics, but it was a new championship. Renault was the engine supplier. Hopefully there's no affiliation with Renault here, but Renault supplied the engines, and there was massive issues from a parity standpoint with the engines. I'm talking like 10 miles per hour. Like, I don't know if some people know Robert Wickens, who's a great Canadian race car driver. Robert was in the series at the time, and I'm not kidding you. There was like cars that were 10 miles an hour off on straightaway speed. It was crazy. And it had nothing to do with the team. I drove for probably the best racing team in the United Kingdom. It was Carlin. Incredible
they're
racing.
Quite well known.
Oh, they're very well known.
Very
they're
established.
Trevor Carlin, great guy, super great team, but it was out of their hands. Like, they had no control over these engines, and it basically tanked our season in a lot of ways, and we had a terrible time. I think I finished 18th in the championship. I sat on one pole when it was wet. When it was wet out, I got a pole position, and I was like, I told you it's the engine, just change the engine. And they knew the problem, and we couldn't fix it, but we ended up having a pretty disastrous year, and we were already out of money before this time, and we just like scraped this together last minute. So when this season ended, it was like, I thought we were done. I'm like, man, I'm really came a far way, thought this racing thing could work out, and now I have to move back to America, and I don't think I'm going to be doing this anymore. Probably got to go to college or something is what I thought.
So was there a moment where you had to dig deep and find motivation to pick it up again and create some new opportunities? So talk us through that. It's always good to hear how people, when they're at those low points, how do they find that determination, the grit to keep going?
Yeah, the motivation was always very high. I believed in what we were doing. I got to say, I had an unfair advantage too. My dad was, just kind of a superhero in my life. It's an unfair edge over other people. If I didn't have my dad, I don't think I could have become a race car driver. I was working hard at what we were doing, but he was working just as hard, if not harder than me, to figure out solutions. I got kind of a lifeline though. Came back to the United States, got this random phone call from an Indy Lights team owner, Sam Schmidt, and he's like, we got a big sponsor, which doesn't happen in Indy Lights. He's like, we'll put you in the car for nothing. I think it was $750K to $1 million was the budget for Indy Lights at the time. Now you're getting bigger budgets here. Where the heck are you going to find $1 million? And he ran us for $100,000. I mean, the whole seat was paid for. We didn't have insurance, which in Indy Lights is a very risky proposition. We're running on ovals, okay? If you wreck a car, it's probably $200,000 to get a new chassis and the whole thing. So we didn't pay for an insurance because we couldn't afford it. Got the seat, and I ended up winning the championship. And, it was one of those great opportunities where it's in front of you. You just try and seize it. And I think everything aligned in a lot of ways, too. Timing is everything, and certainly a little bit of luck in that. But I was prepared for it, and I definitely kept my faith all the way through it, but it gets tested. If that opportunity hadn't come along, we were still working on, what are other solutions that we can be creating to try and do something else? Just fortunately, that door ended up being the right door.
I find sometimes when you have that, if you've had a period of challenge and then you work very hard, you work through it, and then you get past it, and you have a success of some form in your career, in your pathway, there still can be this lingering sense that it all might evaporate, right? Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of alignment that happened. Your talent, everything came together, the team, the championship. But going out of that season, were you feeling really confident? You knew that you had it, and everything was going to progress now, and the confidence level just increased, or were you still having to work through some of the doubt? Because if you look back over a 3-year period, there was a lot of challenge that you'd work through. So I'd like to know more about the mindset that you were developing at the end of that season, having won the championship. Where were you at?
Oh my gosh, my career has been a roller coaster as far as emotions. So where I was at after winning Indy Lights, first off, it was wow, this is great. I just got a contract. I got approached by the smallest team on the grid. They didn't even have an engine before the 2012 championship. So 2011, we won Indy Lights. I signed a deal with the smallest team on the grid. They didn't have an engine contract. And it was all right, well, it doesn't matter. They're going to pay me. They're going to pay me some money, and I'm going to be their race car driver. And that's it's a massive shift, and it's a monumental achievement to go, man, we were just trying to get to the top level in motorsports, and now I've signed a contract with somebody, and they are going to pay me to drive their race car. It's a really cool deal. Even though it's the smallest team on the grid and we don't even have an engine, so we might not show up, but they're still going to pay me. At least they're supposed to. So I tell you that because everything's pretty good in the moment when that's happening. The off season felt great. But then, the kind of reality hits. We got an engine, and you're okay, it's really going to happen. We're going to show up, we're going to race in the IndyCar Series, and I'm their guy. And I better do a good job, right? And I went through this really tough transition period in my first year of racing. I thought I was going to get fired every weekend. It honestly kind of reset. Talk about Sebring, where I had those doubts. I had no doubts up to IndyCar, and then IndyCar, it completely reset. And I'm man, if I do anything wrong, if I wreck this race car, they are going to fire me on the spot. And that's what I had in my mind every time I was on the track. And it was a really tough transition for me because it was the first time I was getting paid. I was used to paying to drive a race car. I was I got to find the money, and I'm paying, and it's no big deal. It's a different mindset when someone starts to pay you to do your job. And so I had to really figure out how to handle that environment, and it came back to a re-confidence thing. I had to find a new set of confidence now in a different way from what I was used to, and that was a big transition period for me. And there was a lot of phases to that for the first 3 years. I had a terrible rookie season in IndyCar. It was really, really tough. We had no resources. I had no teammate. I had no data. It was a brand new race car. I had nothing historical to look at. It was just like, hey, figure this out. Good luck. And everything up to that point, I was always on good teams with great teammates and great data. So I would just show up and I could analyze everything and constantly have a reference point and figure it out. It was not difficult to do. First year in IndyCar, it was really difficult to figure out how do you make this thing go well. I mean, I was just driving the car hard. That's all I was doing. I was like, maybe I'll just drive it as hard as it wants to be driven, and that should be pretty fast, right? That's basically what I was doing. And it was a hard season, and I definitely got, where I thought I was going to get fired every weekend. That started to happen. I started getting threatened where I was going to be fired eventually. And so then I just had to work through all that. And it was tough. I mean, it was like survival mode is what I felt like.
Do you think by this point you would have developed some mind management skills? Because when it comes down to the heat of competition, you have to find the flow state. You can't have doubt in your mind. You're going to go into the wall. So I imagine by this point you would have started developing some of that skill set of mind management.
Yes, I did, and it took a little too long for me probably, and I think the process could have been eased. If I was in a different situation coming into IndyCar, I honestly think in some ways if I was with a bigger team and I had more resources, I could have found a better mental process to be there. But because I had no resources, I was sort of all over the place. And I was letting the fear take over too much early, where I felt like I was going to crash all the time, and if I did, I was going to get fired. But I eventually started focusing on very simple, very, very simple. It's just focus on what's in your control. I have to reduce the noise of what could be, because I can't control that stuff. And what's going to happen is going to happen. I can only focus on the things that are in front of me. And I keep developing my skill sets that are available to me and utilizing my resources. And the more I focused on that, the better I did at my job. And then eventually I got really good at understanding how to perform at my job and to handle the pressure. I mean, for me, it was probably the best experience of my life. I'm actually happy how difficult it was, because it set me up for when I finally got an opportunity to come to Penske. It was no big deal. It was like you show up at Penske and you are expected to perform in all facets. Whether they put you on a stage with 1,000 people and they want you to recite the articles of incorporation of Penske, or they want you to talk about the way we're engineering the car for the Indianapolis 500, or they want you to actually go out on track and win the race. I was ready to do that, and any way, shape, or form. And it was through the hardships in the beginning that I felt like I was prepared for it.
So was that about a 5-year process before you got the Penske deal, approximately?
It was, yeah. I had to kind of fight for this too. I don't think it's really hard to get a seat at Penske, and I didn't think they liked me at the time, especially the president, Tim Cindric. And Tim's, funny enough, he's my strategist. He's been my strategist since I've been on Team Penske. And I'm like, this guy hates me. He's never going to hire me. There's kind of a theme here, right? Like, I definitely had some doubts. But, I fought for the opportunity. I got to know them a little bit. I started showing really well. I started winning races. And, I went through some difficulties. I had a really bad wreck in 2016 where I broke my clavicle, broke my right hand. And I remember I had just connected with Tim Cindric, president of Penske. And we had scheduled a time for me to go to the shop and meet with him. I'm like, please, can you please give me an interview? I'd love to come speak with you and see if there's an opportunity in the future together. And so we scheduled that. I had this massive wreck in Texas. And, as soon as I got out of this wreck, they airlifted me to the downtown hospital in Dallas. And I was like, bring me back to Indy. I was like, I want to plate my clavicle. I was like, I'm not going to miss anything. Everyone thought I was out for the season. And I went and got my clavicle plated 48 hours later? He wouldn't do it the next day, the dang doctor. I was like, just do it right now. And he was like, we have to wait 48 hours. I was like, why? I got it plated, it was in a sling, and literally 24 hours after the surgery, I needed to go to Charlotte. I'm like, I'm getting on a plane to go meet Tim. And I have this cast and everything on, my hand's all broken up. And he didn't think I was going to be going. He was like, how long are you out for? I was like, I'm going to be at your shop in 20 minutes, man. Looking forward to meeting. And we had a great meeting, and he's like, so when are you expecting to be back in the car? Probably, end of the season, next year? I'm like, no, I'll see you in a week. gonna see you in a week. I'll be in Road America. And I had to fight really hard to get back in the race car. They didn't want me to drive. I had to get in a simulator and prove that I could drive the car to IndyCar. And I drove that next race. I finished 8th in Road America. It was pretty good. And then I went to the next race after that. It was at Iowa Speedway, one of our toughest short ovals, and I ended up winning it by a pretty good margin. It was one of my best races I've ever had in my career. And I think that's what solidified the opportunity with Penske. And I think it's in a lot of ways how I got the job.
And we know that you won the championship your first year with them. You could look at that, everything that came before was your 10,000 hours as such, right? Because you came in, you delivered.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. I mean, I think everything, it takes dedication, it takes time and diligence. I think you have to be purposeful with everything you do in life. I've met so many people that are incredibly talented and that, just don't seem to have, whether it's, you choose the word, commitment or focus, or passion. These are a lot of things that are really important. I don't care how talented you are. If you don't put in the time and you don't show up for the opportunity, it won't just continue to happen. It's a great saying. I love this. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and I've had a lot of luck in my career. I prepare and I wait for the opportunities, and when I look for the opportunities too. When they're not in front of me, I'm going and looking for them. I'm constantly trying to manifest something in front of me, and that stuff sounds simple to do, but I think some people, they take it for granted. I've met so many people with tons of talent, and some of it's wasted. I'm like, man, you could do so much more. And so yeah, all that stuff matters, I guess, is where I'm going with it.
So 2 championships, but the big one was eluding you. Although we know 2023, 24, there was a certain race that has been won back to back. But before we get into that, I'd just like to know about you being a 2-time champion, but you haven't won the Indy 500, and that focus, and then what led to this run that you're on currently, back-to-back Indy 500 winner.
What's fascinating was 23 and 24, my wife's here tonight, she can attest to this, is probably mentally the most difficult years for me. And I don't know why that correlates to winning the Indy 500 the last 2 years. I can tell you the one thing that correlated in 2023. I had let go of the obsession with the race, and I found a better balance mentally in my own mind about that particular event. If you're in racing or you're in IndyCar specifically, everybody basically considers your career a failure if you don't win the Indy 500. You can win the most championships, you can have the record for wins outright, but if you don't win the Indy 500, they kind of look at you like it's all for nothing. And I hated that was the formula, and that people prescribed to that. They were like, no, that's how it works. Like, you have to win the 500 to be complete. And it kind of ate me up because it's such a hard race to win. It's one race out of the year, and like everybody makes it this big deal, as it should be. It is a massive deal. But it can like consume you. You can become obsessed with it, and there's so much pressure for just that one race that I didn't have a healthy relationship with it. And by the time I got to 2023, I had to let go of it. I went, you know what? I may never win this race. I probably won't ever win this race, and that's okay. I got to be all right with that. And so what I started doing was I'm on the grid for the Indy 500. I've qualified to be here. Like, I've already won the race. I have already won the race. Like, it sounds a little sappy, but like, it was true. I took it in a little bit more. I wasn't so focused on like, am I winning today or am I not? It wasn't like that attitude. It was more like, look at what we're doing. Just enjoy this race. And I love oval racing. I did not grow up racing ovals, but it is so freaking fun. Like, you have no idea. Especially when you have a good car, it's really, really fun. So I started to just enjoy the job. I said, I get a chance to run 500 miles here. Like, I know I can pass at it and just have fun doing it. Like, I'm not going to worry if I'm going to win or not today. And then we ended up winning. And then we won it back to back. It was like what a crazy turn of events. It was really cool.
I would like you to describe something for me. Just rewind a little bit. The first time that you went flat out around the Brickyard. What was that like the first time in an IndyCar?
Oh, so cool. So cool. Oh my gosh. I think we all like speed here. There's nothing quite like Indy. I mean, even in or race trim, heavy downforce, this car is like loaded up. It's actually not too bad when the car's nicely balanced. It's not too bad to stay flat because it has it by yourself, not in traffic. It's a different story. But it's pretty easy to stay flat by yourself in the corners when it's loaded up. The car's still doing 225, 230 miles per hour on the straightaway when it's loaded with heavy downforce, and it's a rush. I mean, it's a total rush. You've really got to get the thing, you got to open the arc up a lot to keep scrub out of the car, and I mean, you're just like dancing with, I wish oval racing could be conveyed better to people on the outside. It is like such a craft. I mean, this thing is skating half the time, especially in qualifying. I'm telling you, the car feels like it's floating. It's not like it's loaded up and you can feel it really like digging in. It doesn't feel like that. It's like this thing is like just, I am floating. I think I'm floating where I'm gonna miss the wall, and you're just kind of like guiding this missile. It's so cool. And I remember the first time I drove there, I'm like, this is nuts. It was so cool. But you know what's crazy about Indy? Because people ask that, it slows down. You'd be amazed what your mind can just start to process, especially after a couple weeks. Indy, you always get a couple weeks to do practice, and like by the end of the month, it feels, I don't want to say it feels slow, but it just feels controlled at the end of the month.
Amazing. I've had the opportunity to have a media pass and stood on the outside of turn 1 during a practice session, and I stayed there maybe 10 minutes, and after a while, my body told me, you should not be here, with the cars floating right past the wall.
You know what's psychotic? If you go to Indianapolis, so qualifying weekend, if you ever get a chance to go, there's just like this little wall divider in between the track and the pits. And I'm like, man, this is like so old school dangerous. And like everybody's lined up at the end of pit lane, and there's just like a mass amount of people there, and you got a car ripping like 245 into turn 1, and you can literally like, here's the wall, and you can literally like just stand here, and this car is like 10 feet from you, and I'm like, this is not safe. Like, no one should be here. And it's the coolest thing to do. You should definitely do it. Like, go to Indy for qualifying. It's so sick. You stand on the inside if you can get a pass. It's wicked. It's very dangerous, though. Like, keep your heads up,
Let's talk about sports cars. So, we know that you won Daytona this year. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
But I would love to hear about your first experience driving at night in a prototype at Daytona. I don't know what year that was, but if you can talk us through night racing, because that's a different discipline.
Yeah, I had the graveyard shift. So, I was fourth man on the team. I got to be honest with you, I was not a big contributor to our 24-hour win. I basically showed up and just happened to be on the winning team. I was like, you guys did so good. Look at these watches we got, I was like, sick. Especially Felipe. Anyone know Felipe Nasser? Awesome Brazilian guy. He won the race for us basically. I was like, nice job, Felipe. Look at us. We're on the winner's circle. I'm not even joking you. I felt so awkward being a part of the team. I think I drove 3 or 4 hours in the night while they slept. So
it's so different. I don't know how to, I was so single-minded when I grew up racing. In single-seaters, it's all about you, and you're the selfish person. You're the nucleus of the team. Everybody is revolving around your feedback and what you want from the car. And when you get in a sports car situation, now you actually have teammates. It's not like you don't have teammates in IndyCar, it's so different. Now you're sharing with 3 or 4 other people, and it's about compromise, and it's about trying to support one another, and it's not a normal thing in single-seater racing. You're not looking to absolutely support one another truly. I mean, you are, but it's just different. And now you want to get the most out of each person on your team. And I just remember being a part of it and thinking, I don't know, I kind of imagine my son. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I imagine him racing. I felt proud of like the other drivers. I was like, wow, you guys did such a good job today. And it's a unique feeling. It's a really, you don't normally, if my teammate in IndyCar does a great job, of course I'm happy for the team, but you don't feel like proud of the other driver. You're like, way to beat me, man. Great job. That's just not how it feels. And I felt real joy and happiness for the drivers around me. So it was a unique perspective change for me. Totally different style of racing. It's much more of a sprint nowadays because the cars are so robust. Like they just don't break like they used to 30 or 40 years ago. So it's kind of a flat out sprint. But it's different. It's not as mechanical as that IndyCar over there. That thing is just kind of raw and natural. The Porsche and the prototype, it's like flying a spaceship. You got a million switches on there, and you got like 6 engineers shouting commands at you all the time, and they're like, "This is overloading. Change it to this," and you're like, "What?" And it was like, "Can I just drive the car?" Like, so it was a very different perspective change. But I will say the one thing that was awesome was driving at night. It's so cool. You've got like 60 cars on track, and you're just, especially when you're like top dog when you're the GTP, so you're just like cutting through everybody like a Ginzu and flashing your lights. You're like, yeah, the way. So that was really fun. It was a different perspective for sure.
Well, I would like to ask you to give your advice to us. You're a professional athlete, and you've been around a lot of successful racing drivers, many GOATs, all that stuff. And I would love to know if you can tell us some principles of what you think the most successful people that perform consistently, if there's some paradigms or some methodologies, commonalities that they have. And what are the most important ones for yourself as well in your approach?
There's a common thread that I've noticed amongst really successful racing drivers, and the number one ingredient is their awareness for what they need, them as an individual from the car. So like, when you're racing cars professionally, you're constantly, of course, we have a bunch of data on the race cars that the engineers can pull. There's like 100 channels on an Indy car that you can be pulling and looking at things. And you would think, well, okay, the engineers can just sort everything out for you, right? Because they can see it. It's not really how it works, and everybody drives a little bit different. You have to be very in tune with what you personally need. So there's a self-awareness in there, and the greats are so good at understanding what they're missing at all times. And it's what I've tried to perfect in my racing. The engineer's only as effective as your feedback to them. If you give them the correct direction, the correct, recipe for what's happening, then they can help solve the problem for you. If you don't, you can lead them down a rabbit hole, you can go the wrong way, you can get lost, and that still happens to the greats, but it just doesn't happen nearly as often. They're so good at being in tune with themselves and what they need at every moment. If they're deficient in something, they can recognize it immediately and they can find a solution. Or they can at least start to dissect it and understand what is the solution to fix this. They're so good at it, and all the greats have that. The second thing I would say, which is critical, is, it's like anything in life. The greats are excellent at maximizing the team around them. And that looks a little different, I think, for every great, but they find a formula where they get the most out of the people around them. And that, for me, I just try and, I have certain skill sets that I think work well in the team, but I recognize these strengths with everyone around me. And, everyone has something great that they can contribute. And so let's just get everybody's strongest attributes, put them together, let's support each other, let's be positive. I mean, it's like silly stuff, but it works. Like when you're positive and you support each other and you recognize the strengths and you try and lift everybody up, you'd be amazed how much more successful you can be. When you're, if you're negative or you're unproductive or you're closed off and you don't want to be a good teammate, I just don't see it work very often. Whenever I see those environments, I always see it eventually go south. So the greats of the sport, they know how to create a winning environment around them. And that can, like I said, that can look a little different, but the winning environment is the way that you interact with the individuals around you.
I'm interested to talk to you about this. So, because I know that you have very specific goals, right? And you imagine where the trajectory of your career is going to go in some other discussions we've had, which might be the achievement focus, right? which doesn't necessarily lead to happiness all the time. That's almost a different lever, right? And of course, a lot of people that are career focused, who are looking to have a sustainable motivation, they talk about fulfillment, that one's life has meaning, one's values is intersecting what one's doing for a living, etc. So I'm curious how you would compare these three elements, right? Your achievements and the achievements that you want to do, your goals in your racing driver career in the future, what you imagine for yourself, and then how you approach just this notion of happiness and how that fits in with fulfillment.
Well, I'm going to try and riff on this on the fly. I really have not prepared something, but this is a cool way you've, constructed this, because if you look at me 12 years ago, and certainly for the first 10 or 11 years of my IndyCar career professionally, achievement was the only thing that I had in my mind. And it was the only thing that mattered to me. I have to be the greatest of the sport, or what was I doing? It's everything or it's nothing. And that was my mindset. And in some ways, I still have that drive. I definitely do. I would like to be the greatest that my sport has seen. I want to do that. That's why I wake up every day. But I'm not so laser focused on that. And when I was just laser focused on that, I had no happiness. No happiness. And with no happiness, you don't have fulfillment. They interact off each other. So now I feel like I found a better balance where I still want to be the greatest in my sport. It's what drives me. But I don't have to achieve that. It's kind of like the Indy 500. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. And what I want to be proud of is the effort that I put in. And, as long as I look back and I say, I met every opportunity with maximum effort and I tried to make the most of it, then what's going to be is going to be. I'm still going to try and achieve the best, but it can be okay. And I found fulfillment in that too, because now I look at certain things in my career and I go, I want so much more, but look at how much I've done. I think you have to take enjoyment out of those. It could be anything in life too. You have to celebrate those little wins. I used to just dismiss every win. It was it's another win on the way to this. It's that's not really how it works. It's of course I want to be here, but each rung you go up is important, and it is fulfillment. And I have that now. It's taken me a long time to get to that point. I promise you, it's just the last year I'm starting to find that balance. But I look at this and say, if you want all of this, you have to have balance mentally with the way you approach and look at things. And balance can be kind of a broad word, but I do believe it applies to everything. And certainly when you look at your career, you need to have balance to have fulfillment.
I would view you as a high achiever, and talking about balance, I'm curious how you break down the different areas from training, exercise, your other passions. I know you love Japan and travel, video games, and you're also doing charity work, children's books, which we'll talk about in a moment. So what can we learn about someone that is like yourself, who's very focused, who's on a trajectory, who's leading a very exceptional life? But how do you break down what you think the constituent parts of, if we were to maybe not look, say for a month of your life, not 1 week, but a month, how do you break that down?
Well, I have a complex life. I really do. And I'm fortunate I have so much help nowadays. I've got great people around me, Amy's here tonight, who's one of my great helpers. She works on my company and just does so much. My wife, Ashley's here. She does so much for me. I have other supporters that are here. Any high achiever that you meet, they do not do it alone. I don't care how impressive they are. They are dividing and they are conquering. It's never a one-man show. And I've had so much help in my life. It started with my dad and my mom. They really were pivotal in putting everything in place for me. But I guess what I would say is most important, what is the nucleus of that, is your priorities. And this is, I think, most hard for young people because there's so many distractions in the world. I didn't know we were going to be talking about this stuff, to be honest with you. But I do believe this. Young people now, it's so hard to set your priorities and not be distracted by all this candy around you. I still have social media, and I'm thankful that I have help with running it now, but I'm not really on it much. I'm not focused, and it's so easy to get trapped in that rabbit hole where you're just on, social media and you're seeing highlights of everybody all over the place. And they're just highlights. You're not seeing the real meat and potatoes of things. So
priorities is always the focus. So there's all this stuff that I want to achieve in life, but my nucleus right now has been my family and my racing. It's those two things. And so everything else can be built off these priorities. If you're going towards a project, that you want to achieve in your life, then, don't fill it up with 6 other things and start dividing your time. I mean, you need to stay laser focused on kind of one thing in front of you. And once you get that steady, then you can start adding to it. So I think we're trying to be very careful on the way, if you look at our portfolio right now, how do we add to things, and we're doing it carefully where we're not oversaturating. So the priorities is always the nucleus. And for me, that comes down to racing and family. Where's the racing career at? What am I doing to be fast on the racetrack? Like, if I'm telling you, I have this conversation all the time with Amy. We have stuff coming across our desk. We're talking about starting a foundation. We're trying to bring in new commercial sponsors. We're trying to do this, trying to do that. There's a million things that we could be doing. And I'm like, if you look at my brand right now, it's kind of all for nothing if the racing isn't working out. Yeah, okay, I could stop racing and I could create a new brand portfolio. But the most important thing for me is on-track success. And I'm not saying that has to be for everybody, but I know that's my priority right now. So how am I supporting my team? What are we doing for next year? How are we setting up? What were our weaknesses? What do we need to work on? That is my number one focus, because I know everything else is built off of it. So you have to get your priorities straight. And I think any high achiever knows that. They know where their bread and butter is, and they know what they can build off of it, but they never forget that nucleus piece that's making everything else tick. So just think about that in your life. Whatever is the priority, make sure it stays the damn priority, because people get lost in trying to do too much, I think. That's what I've observed, and I've tried to stay very focused on what is our priority at the time.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I have to think about that. Amazing.
It's kind of abstract. I don't know that I really said anything other than priority, but I just reset the word.
Well, the last thing I want to talk to you about is some of the children's books in particular. I think that the charity work that you're doing. So you want to tell us a little bit about these programs?
Yeah, so the kids' book was more of like a fun, passion project that we've had a great time doing. We got a 2.5-year-old, and there's like no racing books out there. There's a couple more coming online now, but we were like, let's make a couple more, racing books, especially about IndyCar. Like, you can't find an IndyCar racing book anywhere. So we made this book, and the charity tie-in is we've done some charitable giving with the book too on book sales, but we've got a foundation that we're going to be starting too. I used to just support these two charities, Serious Fun Children's Network and Wags and Walks, which is a dog rescue out of Nashville. And we held this ping pong charity event. We'd raised a bunch of money. I think the last year we did it, we raised like $270,000. Roger ended up matching. That's how we got there. It was like $130, and then he matched it. What a great guy. But now we've gotten to the point where it's like, we want to do more. And we want to be able to control a little bit where we give the money, and make sure that every dollar we bring in is effectively brought in. We're not squandering it. We're not, having a ton of expenses. I want to be super transparent. So I think a foundation is going to be really, really critical for us. And so that's what we're focused on now. And the kids' book's been kind of a fun piece of that. And, it kind of comes back to this last point. It's like, well, if you want to be a high achiever, what do you focus on? And this stuff, we're fortunate. I'm in a time period right now where we can start building this stuff out. But, don't try and build that stuff out before you're really able to do it. I was just having a conversation with another agent today, and they're perplexed. They're constantly perplexed by young athletes right now, where they're ready to focus on like the marketing before they've even done anything. And you're like, and they're like trying to beat their head in the sand and be like, dude, you just need to, like, what's your priority? Like, you need to get on the field first, and you need to like focus on the job before you start trying to tell people about what you do, because you haven't even done it yet. And I just think, people get ahead of themselves, and we're playing a little bit catch up, but I think we're in a position where we can, start to build this stuff out. But giving back is important to us, and I think this foundation next year is going to be a really fun challenge.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rod.
Yeah.
Damn, man, that was really, really good. I'm really inspired right now. That was crazy. We've been sitting down for a minute, there's a whole proper IndyCar right there. I think we go full field trip mode. We walk over to it, and you explain a little bit of it, because today they were like adjusting little suspension pieces, and I was like, you can do that? What?
Dude, I have to stop you. Like, just so everybody in this room and outside knows, please take care of that car. I didn't... You have no idea. I didn't realize what this car was.
Yeah, me neither.
Like, you know, you would have thought like, oh, this is the car you won the Indianapolis 500 in. Kind of. I mean, it is the livery. That is the car that I'm going to drive next year in the Indianapolis 500.
Like, not a show car. Like,
it's not a show car. It's not a show car. That is chassis 066. It has been on the racetrack once. I just drove that thing in October at Indianapolis for our off-season test. We were doing a Firestone test as well. It felt good. It felt so good. God, it's nice when they feel good. So it's been on the racetrack once. It's a brand new race car.
you got here today, and they're like, oh, they sent
My
that
engineer
one?
texted me, and he was like, I'm in LX. And I was like, cool, you gonna come to the event? He's like, no, I'm headed to Australia. I was like, okay, well, thanks for telling me you're 20 minutes away. And he was like, hey, by the way, that's chassis number 66 you got. And I was like, I thought it was Scott's pole car. So my teammate Scott McLaughlin, they had his pole car from Indy this year wrapped up as well, because they had this shell car going everywhere, and they needed multiple of them. I thought that was the car we had, and then he told me, he was like, no, dude, that is our brand new car for next year. And I was like, cool. I was like, we should probably put some stanchions around that or something. Please be careful with this. It's super cool though. That is a real race car. I'm gonna actually drive that thing in Indy next year. So
that's awesome. So I'm so glad you said that, and I think we have the most respectful people ever at Race Service. I think it would be so fun to get up and walk around that, and like, again, I don't know the ins and outs of IndyCar, and the more and more I learn, like, it is very technical and also like very mechanical and tactile. There's a lot you have to do. Like, let's field trip. Where's Rod? Let's do this.
I don't know how this works.
No, we're just me neither. There's no rules here. So everyone respectfully, don't mess up Joseph's car, because we want to watch him win.
I'm a little nervous. So
I
we're
know.
all just going to gather around this thing?
Yeah, we're just going to figure this out together, and it's going to be a really good time.
Oh my gosh.
You did enough of explaining where no one.
There's a spotlight on this, yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole thing.
This feels like a comedy show, like we're going to do some crowd work, you know?
If you want to. There's
I like that.
Yeah,
I
with
like
the red
Firestone
beanie,
better, but cool that you got Goodyear, you know? Thanks for coming.
There's some good fits, too. Yeah, that's anything.
Dude, I mean, so this is a real deal.
So, you're actually, this car,
Yeah, no, this is a real thing, man. Real deal. You know what's cool about these that people don't realize is at Indy, every little detail counts. Like, I'm not kidding. We started playing. Are we live streaming this? I don't want anybody to know what I'm talking about. Like, you start playing with tape. This is like Days of Thunder stuff, okay? You know how they're like rubbing on the car, and he's like, this is a special one. We kind of do that with these for Indy. Like, there's certain bits of tape that you'll start putting somewhere that it just might like flick up when it's on track, and it might do something. Like, there's crazy stuff that people think of. The floor is very important. The tolerances, like, you know, this thing goes through tech, and they put all these templates over it, and everything has to be like within 1,000th of an inch. Otherwise, it's illegal.
Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, so they end up trying to like get this body work just perfect so that they can maximize where they can put it. Because you start moving this stuff, I'm telling you, like, you move this like 1,000th of an inch down or out, and it could be like 10 pounds of downforce.
No way.
It's crazy.
Because in here, this one tripped me up. You have like levers on the inside here.
Yeah, it's a very mechanical car. Like we talked about the Porsche. I'm telling you, the Porsche was it was a tough car to drive. It was so electronic. This thing is very mechanical. It feels natural when you drive it. Like, it responds very naturally. You have roll bar adjusters in the car, so you can change the front and rear roll stiffness.
That's what That's
what that is.
And that's you. Like, you're just making that call. You're driving, and you're like, I need more.
Then we have weight jackers. People don't understand how the weight jackers work, but there's like a cylinder sleeve on this right rear damper, and you can control the dynamic ride height of this right rear, and you can jack the dynamic weight, or really the static weight of the car, on the left and the right front. So when you're changing the weight jacker, you're either putting more static weight on the right are on the left side. If you want the car to turn more, you put more left front weight. If you want the car to stabilize and like not turn super well, you put it on the right front. And so those tools combined with the roll bars is what I have to work with at Indy. And I'm telling you, you're like adjusting that stuff all the time. When the wind condition changes and the thing feels like it wants to swap ends on you, you're like all over the tools, and every corner is different. Like there's 4 corners, but they all feel completely different. It's crazy.
As a driver, when you get to this level, do you have to like study engineering, or is that just fully like you're in the seat, you just know what you need and you learn how to adjust it?
I mean, everybody's different. I mean, most understand, you know, if you're at this level competing, you should understand what everything does. There's stories, you'd be shocked. There are stories of drivers that, man, I mean, it just goes back to like, you should really understand what you're doing at this level. There's guys that have been in here and they're like, they don't know how the roll bars work. And you're like, how do you not know
they just
how,
run it?
you know, the general stiffness works on the suspension? Like there's people that don't know. But
there is a level of like you, the person that was up there explaining like just how dedicated you are to the craft. Like other drivers might not go as far as learning this. Like some of this is you just like giving.
No, definitely. I mean, look, I don't have an engineering degree. Like, I didn't study it from a what would you say, from like a high level or from an institution. But you get sort of a tribal education, because I've been in racing for 15 years, and I wanted to learn everything that I could about these cars. Like, I'd go to the shop and I'd be like, please explain, you know, this particular gearbox to me. How does this work on this vehicle? And I want to understand, like, why are we routing, you know, the exhaust this way, and like, you know what, I don't know. It's just like all sorts of stuff. Like why do we build the wings this way, and how do we make sure that the tolerances are all correct? Like I wanted to know all this stuff. Like setting up the car at Indy. Oh my gosh! Like I'm so thankful for my chief mechanic, because like it's critical to get this right. If I have a bad story at Indy, I think it was 2014. They gave me 0 net toe in the rear going into the race, and I thought I was gonna
know what that means.
I thought I was gonna wreck the entire race, and I ended up coming in and being like, guys, I'm telling you, the car's broken. Like I don't know what it is, but the car is broken. Like I am gonna wreck this race car. And the car looked perfect. They were like, what are you talking about? There's 0 issues. The suspension's intact. Everything looks great. We didn't find out until they put it on the pad and they got the rear toe wrong. And it was just, there was 0 toe. It was just completely straight. And if you have 0 toe in the rear of this thing, it is violent. I mean, you have to at least have some
fighting it.
Yeah, it was really, really difficult. So just little stuff like that. I feel like people wouldn't even realize that. You're like, oh, you just don't have a little bit of toe in the thing. Like you need 120 thou. That's all you need. I mean, that's tiny. You know, and if you have that little difference off, this thing feels like a nightmare.
So like the front of it, then like this little knob thing.
Yeah.
Will you do it? Will you show the?
Yeah, I'll touch it. Yeah.
I don't want to do it, dude. After that.
So yeah,
This moves off of that.
Yeah, it does. So this is the front wing adjuster. So that's what's nice. You have the rear wing adjuster too. That one turns up and down. So when I come in for a pit stop, if I need an aerodynamic change, I need more front load versus rear, they can change that. You can also trim the rear. So they'll have, you see how they have a spindle back here? You can basically trim this thing out during the race. And like, this sucker doesn't make a lot of downforce, to be quite honest with you, but it does affect things. Like you take a degree or 2 out of this.
Yeah, like I was going to say, like that little twist that you did there, like just that, when you're driving, like you'll feel that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude. Definitely. You know, no one's going to, I'm not going to tell the story because there's not enough context. But I mean, typically, like if I need 1% more front downforce, he's going to go, yep, all right, I need 2 turns in, right? And then he would take it back out and make sure he gets it right. They're going to rebuild all this, I think. So maybe you guys could mess this car up. No, but a percent of downforce, a percent change in your balance is very, very big at Indianapolis. So, you know, sometimes we talk, what do you need? You need a turn in, you need 2 turns in, and that basically 2 turns equates to about 1%. So, you know, if you're asking for 1 turn, it's only like 0.5%. But it makes a big difference.
That's so cool. Like hearing you explain it makes me like really want to dig in. And
you know what else is nuts about this? I mean, just to be honest with you guys, I don't know how we were driving these without these screens. And now that we have them, I'm like, thank you so much for putting these on the race car. And it's it's honestly saved a lot of lives. I don't know if that's just coincidence or not, but there's been some incidents where if we didn't have that, like it could have gone south really, really quickly. So
I love cars. I have so many little nuances, but you see it, and when you aren't driving them, you're like, yeah, cool race car. So then when you break it down and you explain it, I'm like, oh damn. And it's like, it's going to make me that much more excited to watch you race and be like, he's dialed today.
You start playing with a lot of stuff. Like you see these shutters on the side. Like we're basically trying to run this thing as closed off as possible because the more you can close it off, the less drag the car is going to create.
Yeah.
But you don't want to overheat at the same time. So where are you going to be in traffic? Where are you placing the car? It's the same stuff that we all deal with, whether it's NASCAR or Formula One. We're all trying to play that balance between performance and reliability. And at Indy, it's like, it's just magnified.
Yeah.
Because Indy's the tightest tolerances. These other tracks you go to, you can kind of get the setup wrong and you can overdrive it and just kind of make up the deficit. At Indy, if you don't get it perfect, you're going to really struggle. It's so hard to make up just the smallest miss. That's why, like, we always say Indy is the biggest team aspect of IndyCar because it really is. If we don't get the car perfect, you're probably not going to win the race that day. Like, everybody's got to nail it. You got to have the best stops. The car's got to be in one piece. It's got to be perfectly built, and you got to drive it really well. And that's why Indy's hard to win.
So when you were talking about winning it and you were having fun with it, did you feel that energy with your team as well? Like, do you think you brought that to them?
I think we bring it to each other. Like, you know, they feel like if we build the right car, we got an opportunity to win the race, and vice versa. I know that when we nail, you know, our job on the pad and we get this thing perfect, and like Luke and I are in the right place, my engineer, like I know we can do it. And, you know, that's why you show up. You don't go racing just to, you know, you're not just have fun. You know, it's not like it's not. I mean, we're having a good time, but we're there to compete, and we really feel like we believe in each other. We believe in what we can do as a team, and we know we can win the race if we get it right. So
you have a good balance.
It's an exciting environment to be in when you feel like, look, I'm showing up, and today can be a day we get it right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. All right. So this last bit, I want to make sure to open it up and let everyone here, or at least some people here, get a chance to ask you some questions. And I'll give you like 2 just to kind of start it off and all that, make sure no one's shy, let everyone shuffle back to their seats respectfully without damaging your priceless, wonderful race car. All right, on the most human level, what's your favorite ice cream flavor, man? What do you like?
What is it, Neapolitan? Like
just a standard Neo? Vanilla, chocolate,
like
strawberry?
If I'm going to like an In-N-Out, that's what I'll get.
You're just going to go with that?
Yeah, 100%.
I like that.
But I am a very plain individual. Like I would just rock a vanilla. Like
I feel so
lame
seen.
of me. I know.
I get a lot of crap for that, of how plain I am, so that's cool.
Like, do you guys have Chick-fil-A? You have Chick-fil-A out here, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, it's just a plain vanilla cone from Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
There's like nothing better.
Dude, you know my psycho moment with Chick-fil-A is I'll run the nuggets without sauce. I don't care. I'll do it.
Hey, don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah. All right, and then the whole other side of that is I really did love what you had to say about like winning and your mindset and how you've applied that so much and how like you really do have this drive, but you give it the space to be light when it needs to be. My question for you is like, you have a lot of years of racing now, and you have a lot of years of having to be on and such high pressure. How do you get back to that mindset when you maybe don't have it? Like, do you have any tools that like get you back there? Because like when you're on, you have to be on, and you're driving a car really, really fast, and like the stakes are high.
Yeah. Well, it's different for everybody. You know, I mean, it's hard to give a concrete piece of advice. I think you have to find your own formula, but for me, I'm actually a complete introvert. So when I'm like in a bad spot, I just need kind of some personal time, and man, I could just like go stare at a wall for like half a day, and it's like, okay, this has healed me, and I can get back into a better zone. But I try and lean on. I try and lean on the individuals that are close to me. I mean, my wife's been tremendously helpful to me to try and rebalance me. Having a son is a big shift. Like, that gives me a lot of hope and energy these days. So it looks different for everybody, but I think you receive what you give, and I've always tried to rally around the great people that I have the opportunity to work with. Like, I feel that when I'm here. I talked about this when I first sat down, but like race service has this amazing vibe to it. And you've got all these individuals that are super talented and creative, and they have their own strengths, but they are like polite and they're supportive of each other. And it just like that stuff can't be overstated. Like when you go to a good environment, it makes a huge difference. And so that's what remotivates me when I get into a slump. You know, it's the people around me that pick me up. And if someone around me needs to pick me up, I try and be there for them, you know? So I would really emphasize that's how you be a great teammate. You know, it's the simple things where you've got a good attitude and you're constantly looking for who needs that little boost, you know, because you might be that person that needs that at some point. And I think I get that from my team when we're in a bad spot.
Are you aware of that to the point of like, I love that. That was so well said. Are you also aware of that of like, if you feel negativity from people for long enough, like you kind of like move away from that to like protect that?
I have now. I used to not. Like I used to have this thing where I wanted to make sure like everyone was good with me.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, like no one had anything bad for me. And I just learned like, you know, it's impossible to please everybody. And I definitely recognize negative people around me now, you know, and if they are negative, I'm like, gosh, I just try and distance myself a bit, you know, or at least try and be a positive influence for them.
Right.
Like maybe I can flip them a little bit. If you can't flip them, then hey, no problem. It's your thing. But I think trying to be a positive influence is so important, and surround yourself with that. You know, be that good example for the people around you, and I think you'll get it back in a lot of ways. And it can't be overstated. It's so important, whether it's professional auto racing or it's something else in life. It's just like really critical.
Yeah, no, that's really well said, and I feel you, because it can be kind of like that corny thing to say, but when you actually look at it, it's like, well, it is just that real. Those are mine. It was the ice cream and the mindset. So everyone else, let's do some questions. All right, yeah, we got some questions
Sick.
here. I promised you a question. You said you're like, I have a question ready. That was.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph, for coming. Appreciate it.
Yes,
awesome
sir.
talk. My question's about F1, and what are your kind of general feelings about F1's kind of surging popularity in the U.S., sort of encroachment in the U.S., I guess, and how can IndyCar, do you see it as a rival? How can IndyCar compete with F1? What does IndyCar need to do better? What are your overall thoughts, I guess, on that kind of relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, first off, the popularity rise I love. I mean, you know why? Because whatever is lifting motorsports and the popularity of that is a good thing. And the Drive to Survive push that happened and all of a sudden ignited this interest in the sport, it's just good for everybody. It's good for NASCAR, it's good for IndyCar. I think we should all capitalize on it together. You know, and I'm a big fan that we should all be working together a little bit more. Like, we shouldn't be fighting. It shouldn't be, hey, is it NASCAR or Formula One or is it IndyCar? Like, what's the best? I don't subscribe to that. I like all racing. And I think when you get down to it, most motorsport fans, they like everything. You know, okay, yeah, they might gravitate to something, you know, this way or that way, but like they respect everything at the end of the day. And so when you start creating this divide in the culture, I just think it's bad for the whole landscape. So that's where I stand with how do I feel about Formula One rising. What I will say is I think IndyCar is in this amazing window right now. You know, I don't just want to wish for IndyCar to become a bigger form of motorsport. When you look back in the 80s and 90s, the dominant player in U.S. motorsports was IndyCar. IndyCar was like at the top of the pyramid, and it rivaled Formula One, and it was like this big thing. And, you know, we had the split in the mid-90s, and it turned into 2 series, and it kind of just threw a lot of people off. And now it's like it's been slowly ticking back, and it's had this great rise. And coming into 25, with Penske owning the series, I do think they are a powerhouse that, you know, takes their time to layer in, but I think they have the firepower to help grow the sport, and I think the Fox deal is going to be really, really big for our championship. I've already seen it. I was here on yesterday for a huge shoot that we were doing for commercials, and I've never seen a group invest nearly as much as they're investing in IndyCar. We just weren't getting it the last 10 years that I've been in the sport. So I'm so excited. I think Fox will be that sort of springboard to ignite the fire. And once that thing gets going a little bit, we have the team to pour more gas on it and really blow it up. So I think that's just good for motorsports. You know, I would love to see more crossover from Formula One. Like you have a lot of guys that want to go to Formula One that are looking at IndyCar now because there's no seats. Like, where are you going to go? The potential to get into Formula One is almost non-existent now. So they go, well, I want to go to IndyCar racing. That looks like where it's at. So it's not a knock on Formula One. It's just a reality of the landscape. And I think we can all have our place, but the more we can raise the whole thing, the better.
That's awesome. That's a really good point. Man, somebody, right there, yeah. Rod, are you doing yeah? Cool.
Hello, thank you for coming. I
you.
actually got to watch you win the Indy 500 this year in person, which was very cool.
Where were you? Where'd you sit?
I was actually right behind Rossi's pit box. So I was like right there.
It was getting dicey with Rossi for like
It was-
10 laps.
I had a feeling he was going to win. I'm going to be
Man,
honest.
I honestly thought it was going to be me and Rossi to the finish, and then like Pato like snuck it in
sent
there in
it.
turn one. Did you see that when Pato like?
Yeah.
Fuck, it was
No,
a little late.
but
I'm gonna
to
be
see
honest
you-
with you.
But to see you overtake...
He does that. He's fiery though,
Yeah.
Pato. You know,
To see you overtake at turn 3, though, when they literally had just said no one is overtaken at turn 3, this entire 500 was great. But I have a very serious question. You see, my dad and I have challenged each other to a K1 race after Christmas, and I am determined to destroy him. So my question
Yes.
is, do you have any karting tips?
K1, you said here in LA.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
Lots
Ooh.
of turns there. No real straightaways.
Oh my gosh. Have you ever taken somebody out in a go-kart?
I am not opposed to it.
Look, it's not ethical, but it is a surefire way to win. Okay. You got to ask yourself, how bad do you want to beat Dad? Because I think you just take him out. It's also a dominance thing. You'd be like, look,
Yeah.
Dad,
Oh,
I'm in control now.
I
okay,
warned him already. I said, I'm going to make you question who you raised. Like, I'm taking it that seriously.
Well, if you end up taking him out, it's up to you. You can tell him that I gave you permission to do that.
Okay.
What's his name?
His name is Dan.
What is it, Dan?
Yeah.
Dan's going down. Put Dan in the wall.
There we
Just
go.
do it.
Really good question. Really good question. Who do we got? So the light, I kind of feel like I'm missing hands. Rod, if you wanna grab a couple that you see.
First off, thanks for coming, bro.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thanks for coming.
Quick question. For somebody who's 27 years old, no experience, but a lot of drive, what type of professional racing do you believe is realistically achievable starting at this level, at this age?
I'm gonna be honest with you. It's tough. Like, it's the cruelty of motorsports. I would say is that when I hate this. Like, I wish there was better outlets for. There's so many people that want to be in motorsports or want to especially drive in it, and there's just not a lot of outlets. It's different if you when I was growing up and you wanted to be a part of baseball or basketball. Like, there's a pretty clear formula that you can do this, then there's steps to be taken. I mean, it's really hard right now. What I get most excited about is sim racing. I really do. I think it's going to be the most accessible thing for people. And I think over time, you're going to find more and more people that come out of sim racing into professional real world racing. I think that will really happen. It's already happened a little bit, but you get another 10 years, even just let's say another 5 years up the road, that is the most significant outlet that you have now to prove yourself and say okay, I can do this in the simulated environment. Let me try and parallel this into the real world. I think that's the best piece of advice that I would give anybody now. Get into sim racing, perfect your craft. A lot of it does transfer over. I'm in simulators more time than I'm on a real track nowadays. Like, I race in a sim because we're restricted. We're not allowed to actually run in reality very often in the off season, so we're testing on simulators. So everybody's doing it. And I think if you can prove yourself in that environment, that's going to give you a better gateway to a professional seat. I can't sugarcoat it, though. It's so hard. I mean, if you're 27 and you're going, all right, well, where can I go, to get involved in this? It's not impossible by any means, but you got to come up with some sort of strategy, the business strategy and proving out your skill set. You can prove out your skill set in the simulated environment and then figure out a business strategy on who's going to fund a career path for you somewhere. And that second part's the really hard one. And it can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't just mean you have to find some burger joint or something to sponsor you. Like, I got In-N-Out to say yes to me. It doesn't have to be that. You can come up with a creative formula or find somebody, that's going to help fund a career. But it looks different, for every different make. So it's probably the hardest question that you could ask is, exactly how do you put a formula in place for that? So I hope there's something you can draw from it. It's not going to be crazy helpful, but it's a tough industry. And what I would say, what I tell a lot of people, if the racing career didn't work out for me, I wanted to be involved in motorsports. And it would have been in some facet. I would have gotten, into the engineering side or the mechanic side, or maybe it's the content creation side, like what's happening here at Race Service. There's just a lot of ways that you can be involved in a team and, celebrate those wins without just being the driver. I know that sounds a little, insignificant, or I don't know. Maybe it doesn't sound authentic coming from me because I drive race cars, but I mean that. Like, you would be shocked at how passionate and just impressive it is for all of us on the team when we win. It's not just about the driver. It's really not. It's every individual that's there, and we all celebrate it together. So even if the driving thing doesn't work out, there's just a lot of paths that you can look at.
Dude, I think that was a really cool answer. I love what you said about sim too, because when I think about that, we don't know what the future of that is going to be yet, right? Because in 10 or 20 years, if that has more popularity and you have the viewership, then all of a sudden, like, people will get behind it. It'll start becoming more mainstream. Could be a whole new thing.
Honestly, sim racing's super fun too.
Yeah.
Like, I get on there on the wintertime with some other drivers, and like we have a blast. Like, it's really, really fun.
That's cool. Do you ever run like different cars and classes just for funsies?
Oh yeah, I never run an IndyCar. Like, I'm always running like a supercar, or like Ferrari Challenge is pretty fun on iRacing, like stuff like that. It's always like Spec Miata is amazing. I'm never running an IndyCar on the sim, so
that's awesome.
Definitely, it's super fun.
That's cool. What do we got? Oh, there's so many. See, this is, you did a good job. There's so many questions.
This is a good crowd.
This is awesome. Rod, are you still okay? Yep.
This is kind of a two-parter, but the original debate is supercharged versus turbocharged. These Indy cars, they rev beyond what you'd normally, a road car can't do that in traffic. So when you drive the Indy car and then you go hop into a rental, Civic, these turbos, do they really hit the same way? I mean, when you're driving a car that's actually, built like this, do you still get, really excited about the mechanical side, not just like, it could be a nice little Alpha. That's fun. That's fast. It's not, 100 miles an hour, but it'll corner it, 60, 70, fun. Versus something like this where you're coming out of, turn 2 at 180 to 200 miles an hour, in traffic. Do you still find anything new or anything old? Do you have a classic car that you actually see as the pinnacle of not the fastest, not the most expensive, but truly a driver's car? What's your pick? And tell me, supercharged or turbos?
That's a great question. Just to answer the first part, like, dude, I get so jacked up on like all sorts of vehicles. Like, it doesn't have to, I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be this. You'd be shocked. This actually turns into more of a job than anything. Like, I'm showing up at the track. Of course it's fun. Like, I'm having a great time, but it's a lot of work. Like, they're like, all right, we got to do a 8-hour test day. And I'm sure everybody in here would be like, I would love to do that. But you do it enough and you're like, man, all right, we got a checklist. Like, it turns into a bit of a job. So I say that because if I go run a go-kart somewhere at a cool track, like just a little 125cc or something, I'm telling you, it's almost just as fun as driving that. And the same thing with a lot of road cars. Like, we were just looking at a Mitsubishi out there a minute ago, like a super classic, and I get jacked up just about that stuff too. Like, I'm still a car guy. I loved, like, when I was 16, I was in this like STI era with when like the WRX STIs were like a big thing, and Fast and Furious was still raving. Before they started like killing a bunch of people in the movies. What happened?
It got so crazy.
Where did we go?
And Tokyo Drift was like, all right, well, you're traveling, but all good. And then after that, it got real different.
They like lost the plot. I mean, I know they make a lot of money, but what happened?
If the plot was make money, they nailed it. But if it was the car part,
like the percentage of machine guns to cars, like, it got
the ratio
wrong. Yeah, it's a bad ratio. Supercharged versus turbocharged, I don't care. Either or. One of my road cars that I ended up buying, I bought a Camaro ZL11LE. I ended up going, dude, it's sick, right? Supercharged. I ended up testing it for Chevrolet because when they first came out with it, they were like, we developed this car for the Nürburgring. It's like the greatest thing. And I was like, okay, cool. I went out to Buttonwillow and I test drove it for a bunch of journalists. I was like, this is amazing. I like filmed and I bought the car. I was there to do a job and I ended up buying the car. It's got like 700 horsepower. It's supercharged. So I don't care. It can be turboed or it can be supercharged. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes good power.
That's awesome.
Hope that answers it.
Was it PJ's the white Evo 6?
Yes,
It's so good.
We were looking at it.
It's so good.
It's so clean.
Yeah. We've been telling
It looks amazing.
He's threatening to sell it, and we're all like, "Don't do it."
I think Thad has dibs.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Rod, are you still on question game? Or also our time? I know there was like that last little bit that we wanted to do, so I'm in for as long as y'all. But like, I guess one more. Okay.
One more.
Yeah. We probably sleep at some point.
That's a lot of pressure. One more.
Thanks for coming, obviously, as well. As a race car driver, how do you find sometimes like a tenth of a second, like when you're doing qualifying?
Yeah.
What goes through your mind? What's the preparation mentally or physically as well sometimes to get that like hundredth of a second, tenth of a second? Like how do you do that? Or maybe in your experience and other drivers' experience as well. What have you found to be the key for that?
Oh man, that could be a very long-winded discussion. It's never one thing. I mean, it's a lot of little things. But I think that's true. Again, that's true for anything. Like it could be any craft that you're doing in life. It's not, you don't find a silver bullet. It's like 1,000 little things that add up, right? So you just end up trying to put everything together. And that's true for racing. Like I always think it's the easiest to get yourself down to within like a second and a half of the top group. But man, that last second is so difficult to start whittling away the time. And it just turns into like all these little details. But I would say like, from a broad, standpoint, when you're trying to put a really good qualifying lap together, there's a lot of things that can trip you up. Like if you're trying to focus on too much, that can mess you up. So I end up trying to simplifying qualifying. Like if the car's doing, a bunch of stuff that I don't like in the practice before, well, I'm not going to try and fix everything maybe. Like I'm just going to solve, what are the two big things that I can fix? I try and narrow it down to just a couple items. And it's the same thing with my driving. Like if my driving's off and I'm comparing myself to Will, my teammate, or Scott, and I go, I got to clean up 10 things. Well, let me see the two biggest problems, and I won't try and get everything. Because if I try and do too much, then I'll end up going the other way. So I think simplifying, I can't overstate this enough either. Like you have to learn to simplify things in life. However you do that, don't overcomplicate things. Like just bite-size it. And so you end up doing that on a race weekend, especially going into qualifying. You got to bite-size the process down to something you can actually achieve instead of trying to get everything. You try and get everything and you go the other direction. So I've found that to be very helpful.
Man, I want you to be like my life coach or something. This is tight. We need like one of these every week to just like fire us all up again.
It's been good. You want to do one more? We'll do one
more?
Last one, yeah.
All right, Rod. Okay, boom.
Thanks for taking the time to, drop wisdom on us, of course. I've been lucky enough to make my way to a couple races, find myself in the paddock. My fiance works in motorsports. I'm meandering around, and who is the guy that is yelling at you during driver intros? Who is what? Yeah, he wears the jersey. What's the story on that? Who is that guy?
His name is Greg Dixon. He's from Long Beach, California.
Okay.
His mom, Shirley.
Yes, he was with his mom. I was like,
yeah. Sweetheart, what a great lady.
Of course.
We went to Shirley's house last year as a team, and had a great taco barbecue.
I'd imagine the food was great.
It was amazing. There's this guy. Oh my gosh, Greg Dixon is who you're asking about.
Yes.
He's this guy that just shows up to the IndyCar track and is yelling behind the pit boxes, and he's became a two-car fan. Like he was wearing a Hitachi jersey. That was my car that I was driving at Long Beach. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, looks like a complete psychopath.
He's a unit. He's an absolute unit. The guy is massive.
He's like 6'8".
He towers over the crowd like he's no joke.
He works in heavy equipment. Yeah.
Like he would diesel rig.
He would just kill you if you.
This
tried
sounds
to
like
mess with him.
folklore.
Yeah.
Like I don't know who this person is, and I feel like you guys have an inside joke where you.
No. Real thing. Anyone that goes to an IndyCar race, they're always like, "Who is that man?" And I'm like, "He's our mascot. That's Greg." Hitachi loves him. It's the funniest thing. My main sponsor, they're like, we gotta get this guy on payroll. And I'm like, I don't know. I think there's a liability issue with that. Like, you should look into it. I don't think I should be giving you that advice, but you guys do what you want to do. Greg's amazing though. He hypes us up. You know what the best part about Greg is? He hypes up our crew. Like, I'm already feeling pretty good, but then like he gets in there and our crew's like, let's crush a pit stop. Like, they end up breaking a wheel when they put one on. And you're like, okay, calm down, guys. But no, he's a fan. He's a super cool guy. Always loved IndyCar. He came to Indy this year. He was very respectful at Indy. It's hilarious. You meet this guy, Greg, and you're like, Greg, you gotta chill. Like, there's children at the event. And then he came to Indy and he was like quiet. And he was like, is this a sacred place? And I was like, great, thank you. You got the program. This is Roger's house. Please keep that tone. No, and then, yeah, he was very respectful. Anyways, you go to an IndyCar race, look for Greg. He's nuts, and he's very fun. He's normally quite drunk. Yeah.
That's awesome. We got to get him to a night school. Fire us all.
Oh, you have to get Greg here. He would freak out. I got a surprise. I got a new logo that we worked on for next year. I'm super psyched on it. I wanted something that was like distinctive. I'm like, all these athlete logos, and we talked about this here at Racers, all these athlete logos, they all look the same. It's just like your initials. And I'm like, why don't we make something cool? So this is my new logo that we're going to be pimping next year, and I got 2 hats. This is the hat I normally wear, and I wanted to give 2 out. So I was like, whoever asks a question, we're going to select 2 people, and we'll give some hats out. So you guys can get some of the first run of my new hats. I think I like the Greg question, so you get one. I got a sweet spot for Greg. Thank you so much. Thank you, brother. Oh my God, I feel terrible. How do I just select another person?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's on you.
I'm gonna give this. What was your name again? Amanda. Amanda's gonna put her dad in the wall at K1, and you're gonna get a hat.
That's good. Yeah, that's real good.
There we go.
Yeah,
that's how you decide that.
That's real good, dude. Thank you. This was
thank you guys.
So good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm serious. It's an honor for me to be here. Like I've lived my dream, so I appreciate other motorsport enthusiasts, and thank you for coming out and supporting RS and this evening.
It's really cool. Like, again, like this whole, everything with Night School is like, we just want to share, we want to bring community together. But